Hi everyone, Ian here. So today we're going to be checking out the ChatGPT and Whisper APIs and seeing what we can do with them. What this means is that we are now able to integrate ChatGPT bots into our own products. We don't have to go through the ChatGPT interface and manually type out our questions. We can actually just create our own command line apps, for instance, and pull in responses there. And we've also got the Whisper API where we can now take speech and get it translated to text, transcribed to text rather, and use that over an API rather than having to do it locally, which obviously takes time on our machine. So in today's video, what I want to do is go through a number of different examples. Firstly, how we can just use the API very basically and just get a response, how we can generate our own command line chat interface, and then how we can kind of add on to this and go into a voice response, so we can get our own kind of Alexa situation going where we are talking to ChatGPT using our own voice, using Whisper and the ChatGPT API. So with that all said, let's get on with things. So we've got a couple of examples here of people that are using it for different things, but we get down to the ChatGPT API here, and we can also see what's the best thing about this is that actually we've got Python bindings already in the OpenAI library that we can just grab, and so I will do that right now and use within our own code. So I'm going to have a couple of examples here. I've already installed the OpenAI library locally. If I just take this code and I'm going to need to set the OpenAI.API key, I think it is, yeah. And we're going to need to get an environment variable for that. So and that's already set in an environment variable that I've got in my virtual environment there. So in my project, I've already got an M file with that in. If you want to find that, you can just go into the platform and in your API keys, it's just, you can just generate one here and use it for as long as you like. So let's jump in and see if we can get this working. So I've already got the environment activated on my machine there, you can see, with everything installed. And let's expand that a little bit there. So you can see with this that we are just, in fact, actually, let's import the OS module as well. We are literally getting the API key, using it. We are saying that we're going to use a chat completion with GPT 3.5 Turbo. That is the new one that they have announced. If we jump over to this, one of the things that they've said is actually that they've achieved a 90% cost reduction for ChatGPT, which means that this costs a heck of a lot less than we've been used to thus far, which is great for us. So yeah, let's just run that. In fact, I just need Python. Wow, there we go. Okay, so we are telling about the world about ChatGPT API in the style of pirate. And we've got here, we can see the structure that we've got back. So we've got a number of choices with the message content in this kind of JSON structure, or this dictionary that we've got back. So yeah, ahoy ye landlubbers of Aston, listen up, have ye heard of the marvel that is ChatGPT API? So we obviously get all the loveliness of ChatGPT and its crazy kind of responses and the way it can behave very simply through this API. And previously you would have had to use like stuff like wrappers for the interface in order to be able to behave in this way. I've written a couple of scripts on that and I never really talked about them because actually it was kind of a janky way to do things. So we had wrappers that would take something like Playwright and log in with it and then use that API key throughout the session. Anyway, so we've got an example here. We can take this a stage further by if I pull up my chat. So you can take this a stage further, where here in this example, I'm going to actually ask for some input. So in this one, I'm going to do Python chat. And you can see that it's, in fact, actually, let's clear that down because that's a bit of a mess. So in here, we're just saying we're a helpful assistant. We are asking for some input that will be returned as a question. And then we are pushing this into ChatGPT. So yeah, it went away for a little bit there because the API was playing up. Hopefully it's back now. I will run this chat. What are you? So we get a response. I am an AI language model designed to assist with various tasks and provide information on different topics. Brilliant. I want to code some Python. Can you help me? Of course, I'd love to help you with Python coding. What would you like to work on? Can you show me a lambda function? Sure, here's an example of a lambda function in Python. So something to note here is that actually we're building up a history of messages with the chatbot. So we prompt it with this kind of system role. If we jump into the API docs here, on here there is some description on chat guide of how this works. And basically it says we can give it context using these messages. So we prompt it with "you're a helpful assistant," and then all the messages that follow are kind of additional history that we are giving it. So there's more information here that is provided in the form of an assistant role. So most of our role messages that we'd be giving back are user ones that we've entered. So if we jump back into Visual Studio Code, so we have a role of user here. This is a role of system, which is ChatGPT. And what this means is that it has that history of the conversation with us. So what I'm going to do here is ask it a question that you wouldn't know the answer to unless it had that history. Can you show me a lambda function? Can you show me how I'd invoke this? So from that, it's not got anything about the lambda function at all from that last single message, but it does have this history here. And so it's gone, certainly here's an example, here's a lambda, here's how you invoke the lambda function, and here's how you print the results. So it's talking about lambda functions. We didn't talk about that in our last message. It's obviously using the message history that we have. So that's pretty cool. Our responses are the kind of message content that we dug into before that I showed in that first instance. But we can take this a step further. So we've got just the ChatGPT API that we've been using so far. Let's introduce Whisper and see if we can do some things with our voice, which is the kind of where things get really interesting. So if I jump over into my second example here. So here, and I'm going to kill this, clear. So here I'm using a library called Gradio. This is actually something that's used by machine learning apps. So Gradio is a way of generating machine learning apps for scientists to kind of explore data and really simply build up interfaces without having to worry about how on earth they write those interfaces. So what it will give us is a web app, and then we can interact with a website through our browser and interact with the data. So you can see we've got a very similar setup as to what we had before. We are prompting it as a helpful assistant, and we here call this chat completion to create with the same model, the GPT 3.5 Turbo model. And here we're doing something slightly differently in that we're going off and using OpenAI audio transcription API and using an audio file that is brought in from an audio input. So we're going to use we've got in here a ton of the different inputs that we can use. So if we go to the docs, all these different types of inputs that can be put on, but we're mostly concerned with this audio one, because what that will do is allow us to get an audio file really simply through the browser and be able to pass it off onto Whisper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call that Python chat2. And we should get a prompt in a second when it's pulled up started everything up. So when you install this is the Gradio library. I found that I had to have FFmpeg and Rust installed for it to actually come down okay. So you need to brew install those before you pip install Gradio. It's taking a little while. Okay, so we have this, and we can see we've got the audio input. We've configured this slightly differently to the defaults. We are using a source of a microphone, and we're using a type of file path. Basically, what's going to happen is this: we are calling this function with the input that we have created. And if we were not using a type of file path, we would basically generate a NumPy array, which is not particularly helpful. We want to be able to pass. It's not helpful when we want to talk to a Whisper, because we need to pass off a file to it. So I'm going to try and use this now. So we need to click here to record from the microphone. I've got a question about something. Can you help me? And see if that worked. I've got a question about something. Can you help me? So we've got the file recorded, and we are going to transcribe this file by opening it up. Basically, this file path. This is now a file path that we've been given into here, and if we submit that, that should then go off up to firstly to Whisper to get the transcription, and then off to ChatGPT to get a response. So we'll see what we get here. And so we get an output response of course, I'll do my best to help you with your question. What's your question? So we can carry on with that. And we're doing the same thing with building up messages. We are taking the transcription text and we're building this message queue again by keeping the messages outside of this function and then adding to it as a global. So here I've also got it, I'm basically printing out the transcription to here. So if we want to get history, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this, I'm going to record again. I got a Python coding question. I'd like to know how I'd do the Mandelbrot set. You can see it's taking its time there a little bit. Obviously we're doing this all remotely. And hopefully the APIs are standing up still, because that was the problem we had before. Okay, there you go. Wow, it's obviously formatting there, it leaves something to be decided, but the Mandelbrot set is a beautiful and fascinating fractal. It's commonly implemented Python. Here's one way you could implement it, and it gives us an example. Perfect, that's exactly what we want. It's understood what I've said, and it's come back with a response. Now, this kind of way of interacting with it is something that I've got from another user, Part-Time Larry, I think his name is. I previously had done this, half of this with Python. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, so I'd never come across this Gradio library before, so it's quite cool to see it like this. He's got some examples on his video as well, so go and check that out. The final example that I want to give is how we can get it to talk back to us. So in this final file, we've got the same situation again. I'm going to go and close this down, clear it down. And if we look at this code here, so this time I'm saying it's a helpful pair programmer, and that the responses should be short. So I've said under 75 words. so that we get concise responses. We're doing the same thing of transcribing the audio that I'm giving it. We're using the same model, we're using the same way of kind of appending to this message queue. But the final thing that I'm going to do is actually have it respond to us with a voice. So let's see if this works. So it's going to come back to us and give us its voice. And that's launched. Okay, cool. Let's refresh this. I'm worried about my what my teammates think of me. They've constantly been criticizing my development work, and one in particular is making really passive-aggressive comments on my pull requests.
It's understandable to feel worried and demotivated if your teammates are criticizing your work. However, it's important to remember that constructive feedback is intended to help you improve. You can ask your teammates for specific suggestions on how you can improve, and work on implementing them. If their comments are hurtful and unproductive, talk to your team lead about the behavior and ask for their support to address the issue. Remember to stay professional and approach the situation calmly.
So yeah, you can see that's worked perfectly. It's come back with a response as well. It came back with a voice response. Let's try another one, because what we're doing here is we're building up this message transcription kind of history again. We're just calling say here. So this is just a very simple application that sits on a Mac that allows you to do text to speech. It's kind of like one of the earliest Mac features that was kind of cool, that was demoed by Steve Jobs. Anyway, so you can do that on the command line straight away. It's just a feature that exists. I'm going to... I got into a really nasty fight with one of my colleagues who was arguing for using tabs over spaces, and I really was just having a really hard time with them. And the other thing I'm doing here as well, I'm actually creating a chat log. So we only saw on the first one.
It's normal to feel insecure when facing persistent criticism, but try to focus on what they are saying rather than taking it personally. You can also talk to your teammates or a supervisor to better understand what you can improve on. As for the passive-aggressive comments, address the issue directly and let them know how their behavior affects you. In the case of the argument, remember that while it's great to have strong preferences, it's important to respect differing opinions and find a compromise.
So yeah, you can see the two statements that I've had there, where it's kind of got the transcription log of what I've been saying, and it has all the history that it's already reading. So yeah, it's kind of, this is really interesting and kind of exciting. You can see how this would be very useful, in particular in mobile applications, because you have the microphone and you're able to interact with a chatbot very quickly. And the thing that's most exciting really is that this can just be implemented with such a small amount of code. This is what, like, it's literally 32 lines, and this is formatted with black as well. So yeah, it's a huge kind of, you can make a huge amount of progress using their APIs to be able to kind of transcribe and get your chat responses. So yeah, I found that really interesting. I thought it was a quite an exciting way of working with this stuff. You can even, I mean, we can edit this, and we've obviously got all the kind of behavior that we could, your helpful pair program, all response usually less than 75 words, respond in the style of Eminem. So pair programmer in the style of Eminem. I'm worried about what my teammates think of me. They've constantly been criticizing my work, and one in particular is making really passive-aggressive comments about my pull requests.
Don't let them get in your head. Let your code speak instead. Use their criticism as fuel to improve your skill set. Display your prowess. and show everyone you're a threat. Stay focused, ignore their nonsense, and remember, true talent can shine even in the darkest. Keep writing code that's tight, and let them know you're coming for the top, one line of code at a time.
So yeah, kind of amusing how you can get these things to respond, and obviously we've got a voice talking to us in the style of Eminem. I think it's kind of skipping over the 75 words prompt there that we should have, but that it should be less than that. But yeah, so yeah, if you want to create a pair programmer that responds in the style of Eminem, I'll be dropping this code that I've created for you in a repo. Go and check that out. Go and check out the APIs and from OpenAI and see what you can create with them. And I'll speak to you soon in a new video. All right, bye for now.